please, let my child come home. My child is a good kid. He goes to church every Sunday. That is my only child that I have. I just lost 2 brothers to violence. That's all that I have. Can you please return my child? Let my child go.
A very clear message from that mother that she believes her 15-year-old son is being held against his will. What information is leading her to that conclusion, and how is law enforcement treating that information? All of that, plus how has this become the longest open Amber Alert in Ohio state history? It's time to turn on the searchlight for Keshaun Williams. Welcome back to Brainscratch Searchlight. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and thank you for caring about these cases like I do. The Amber Alert. Most of us know what it is, but just in case, it's a special condition for missing persons cases where there has to be an imminent threat of some kind identified and the information to act on that threat. In most states, that requires some form of either a vehicle description, possibly a license plate ID, some things like that, coupled up with the fact that there might be a witness that witnessed the actual abduction, or there's enough information to support that that person is at risk for some reason. Here at missingkids.org, the website for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, we see for active Amber Alerts, we only have one going on in the country as of when I'm filming this, but they also have their open Amber Alerts listed here. And for the state of Ohio, they only have one that is currently open, and that is Keshaun Williams, who went missing. They're saying June 24th, 2023. We're going to see the dates slide around a little bit. Actually, that should be the date. Yeah, they're saying that's the missing date. I believe that's the date that the Amber Alert was actually activated. He went missing before that. Let's jump over to NamUs and clear up some of these details and learn much more about this case. Date of last contact, June 17th, 2023, missing from Cleveland, Ohio at the age of 15. He would currently be 16 years old, and I think within a month, he would actually be turning 17. An African-American standing at 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighing around 120 pounds. Even though they don't have it noted here, he does have a nickname. He also goes by Key, K-E-E. For circumstances, what do we have here? Keshaun, last seen June 17th, 2023. So we're now well over a year after attending a party on Gertrude Avenue in the city's Broadway Slavic Village neighborhood. An Amber Alert was issued for him in Ohio in June of 2023 and remains active. Black hair, brown eyes, no real other distinguishing features that we could note here. And clothing for him is changing very drastically from one source to the next. Here they're saying jogging pants, and for footwear, we've got red and gray Michael Jordan tennis shoes. Now, I've been looking at all these different sources, and I think the one that we should trust the most is actually from the investigator directly, who says that Keshaun, they're not sure what type of t-shirt he was wearing. So some places are saying black t-shirt. The investigator is clear. They don't know the color of his t-shirt. He did have gray sweatpants, according to the investigator, and gray Jordans with blue stripes on them. So I'm seeing all kinds of different descriptions on his footwear as well. Also worth noting, his hair was in cornrows. His mother had literally just braided his hair earlier that day. So very clear description on that. But outside of that, no real identifying marks. You know, he's 15 years old, so we don't have tattoos, and it looks like no piercings to speak of as well with that. Let's continue over at Wikipedia and learn a little bit more about where this is taking place. Cleveland, a city in the U.S. state of Ohio. It's also the county seat of Cuyahoga County, located along the southern shore of Lake Erie. It lies approximately 60 miles west of Pennsylvania. It's the most populous city on Lake Erie and the second most populous city in Ohio. It's got a population of 372,000 people as of the 2020 census, and it's part of a larger metro area that goes up to over 2 million residents. So we've got a lot of people in this area. You would think a lot of opportunities for someone to hear something, maybe have seen something, and come forward with that information. And when he initially goes missing, there is some information that comes forward. So maybe we are getting some help on this case, but let's roll through the basics here, starting at cleveland19.com. Amber Alert issued in Cleveland for missing 15-year-old boy. Sharice Snowden, Keshaun's mother, told 19 News that she immediately filed a police report after he went missing. After receiving several unsettling tips that Keshaun may have been kidnapped, the family said they urged Cleveland police detectives to initiate the Amber Alert. And I believe the Amber Alert actually hit somewhere about 6 or 7 days later. Please let my child come home, Snowden said. This is the only child that I have. Just to get a little understanding of where this is taking place, we can see his home is up here on Fleet Avenue, and the party that he was attending is in the 6000 block of Gertrude Avenue, so somewhere down around here. I mean, not very far at all. We're talking a few blocks away from his home. Snowden says that her son called her from the party and she thought that he was headed home. He was like, "Mom, I'm happy to hear your voice. You want me to come home?" I said, "Yes, come home right now. I worked the graveyard shift, so I dozed off," she said. And I believe that phone call happened somewhere around 10:30 p.m. A few hours later, Snowden says Williams made a disturbing call to his aunt. So he calls someone else in the family several hours later. "My sister said he called her at 1 a.m. and she couldn't make out what he was saying. He was just talking all over the place," she said. So I've heard a few different descriptions on that phone call. One of them is that he was highly emotional and she really couldn't understand what he was trying to say. The other one, which came out in a podcast that a local news agency had done where they were interviewing the actual detective, the detective seems to be leaning more towards that Keshaun was saying he wasn't ready to come home for some reason. Now, I did see some other mentions on a few different news sites about the possibility that he might have fallen in with some older crowd and maybe there was some concern that he had something to drink. As a matter of fact, in that podcast I mentioned, I think the investigator says that he might have been drinking and or smoking. So maybe there's something along those lines where we are talking about a 15-year-old, going to a party. Like, do things like that happen? Absolutely. Would that stop him from wanting to come home? Is he afraid that he's going to get in trouble or something along those lines? Possibly. But there's one other small wrinkle in this, and that's only in one source that I saw. They said that there was some fear that he might have been hanging out with these older guys that were actually members of a gang. So just putting that out there. I'm not seeing that very heavily reported, but I did see it in one particular place. And I don't know if it's not being heavily reported because, sometimes news agencies will shy away from stories that kind of have components like that. But of course, we're just trying to share the best information we can about the circumstances of this case that might be helpful for eliciting that tip. So I just want to put that out there, but I'm not going to lean too strong on it. We don't have any, known persons of interest that are associated with gangs, just a small mention that I saw. Keshaun was last seen at his home in the 5700 block of Fleet Avenue on June 17th. Now here we get another different description. I'm just going to put it out there just in case. He was wearing cream-colored jogging pants with white and blue lettering and gray Jordan tennis shoes. So at least we have the shoes kind of matching in this one. But cream-colored jogging pants, a little bit different from the gray description we heard on that. According to the alert, the vehicle involved is described as a black Jeep SUV with a temporary license plate. What are they talking about? Essentially, there's this story that he was seen in a vehicle, that he might have been seen, I'm hearing it described different ways, possibly tied up, looked like he might have been injured, and in a black, I believe a Jeep Cherokee, or they're calling it a Jeep SUV here in the article. And what's interesting is they're actually showing what looks to me like footage from some type of CCTV camera. So I'm curious where this footage is coming from. I don't know. Is this some home security camera? Is this a street traffic cam of some kind? Something along those lines. But we can see several different pictures of this Jeep. Investigators have conducted and continue to conduct multiple interviews and follow up on information provided by sources, Cleveland police said. So it seems like they have a decent lead. It seems like they're even tracking an actual vehicle based on what those images look like. Those look like straight up CCTV to me. Sharice Snowden said, "I'm nervous. I'm fragile. I'm frantic. My child has never been away from me longer. He's never been gone from his home for this long ever. This is hard. The not knowing where my child is, not knowing if someone has him, if he's not safe." So, of course, with the information that we're hearing about he was possibly forced into a vehicle or might have been seen in this vehicle injured and or tied up, we have a mother's concerns being raised significantly. We have the Amber Alert, which I believe, based on this information about the vehicle, this might be what helped trigger the Amber Alert, because outside of having a vehicle description like this, I don't think they would have been able to issue that. So that might be part of the reason why we also had this delay in terms of the Amber Alert happening. Seems to me that someone might have called in a tip about this potentially happening. They did some footwork, found this footage of the vehicle that they think might be involved, and that was enough to get that Amber Alert rolling. Williams first went missing after attending a house party on June 17th on Gertrude Avenue. She says that his location went off at Washington Park, but the SIM card was removed from his phone. Police later said he might have been kidnapped on June 23rd. So there's a bit of interesting phrasing around that might lead us to both conclusions. Maybe there was some aspect of him going to this party. Maybe he was drinking a little too much, decided he couldn't go home at that time, stayed away from home intentionally, and then later on something else happened. And that would kind of also line up with this possibility of the discrepancy that we saw earlier when we were looking at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the record that they have in terms of his gone missing date, which was June 23rd. Keshaun never misses church on Sunday, his mother said. He never misses boxing practice. He always comes home to eat because he loves to eat. He would have texted me. He would have called me. Police originally believed Keshaun may have been traveling in a black Jeep SUV with persons unknown, but confirmed late Saturday night the vehicle was not involved. So a pretty dramatic shift that happens here. And again, they're not being super clear about what happened around this. Based on that podcast, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I'll have links for it down below. Based on what the investigator said in that podcast, he was phrasing things to make it sound like they actually tracked down that particular black Jeep SUV. And it was easy enough to identify because it didn't have license plates. But outside of that, and they don't have a picture of it here, unfortunately, one of the windows was also broken and covered up with like a plastic film. I believe it was the driver's side rear window that was covered up in that way. So it sounds to me like they actually traced that vehicle down and somehow concluded that it had nothing to do with Keshaun's disappearance. So pretty weird that we kind of get this almost start-stop in terms of, hey, we're looking for this vehicle. We think that it's part of him going missing. And then all of a sudden, nope, we've confirmed that that vehicle had nothing to do with it. Now, his mother said that she didn't notice any difference in her son's behavior that day of the party. They had cooked breakfast together and she had braided his hair. She was aware that he had gone out, but didn't receive any details about where the party was located. And I just want to touch on this. I know because I've been looking at several YouTube news segments that have been released on this, and people are being highly critical of, how could this mother not know where her son was? I mean, just being perfectly honest, when I was 15 years old, I was tons of places and my family didn't know where I was exactly. And to the point of, if I wanted to go somewhere else, I might even tell them that I was somewhere else, so I get it. And maybe there is some lesson for someone out there that is hearing this story and seeing this story about, hey, if my kid asks if they could go to a local neighborhood party, keep in mind, this is literally 2 blocks away. Like, Mom, I'm going to be over on that street. But, maybe it makes sense to have some kind of Find My Family app on the phone or something like that. Of course, we do have phone tracking that's happening in this story, but it seems like the phone has been disabled. So that's only so helpful. I don't know, but I just wanted to touch on that. I know people have been critical. Personally, I don't feel like it's super fair to be critical. And I certainly feel like it's not helpful at this point to be critical of this mother for not knowing the exact address, 2 streets over that her son was going to. Snowden said her son is charismatic and he's a very bright kid. He works at the church in his free time and he's a very good student. The community is very big on helping Keshaun. He's a very loved kid and everyone knows him in the community. He's very helpful and respectful, so this is very blindsiding, his mother said. Friends had seen Keshaun at the end of the party, but they got split up. He got left behind, his mother said. Everything after the party was a blur. That is why we're trying to get more concrete information. Other details that kind of shook out about this, once again, this is coming from the investigator directly, is that Keshaun might have been asked to leave the party for some reason.
He was supposedly kicked out of this party. He starts walking down the street, meets up with another one of his friends. They continue walking down the street. Keshaun notices, a couple males on a front porch. Keshaun and his friend approaches them. They start, drinking and they're smoking. Short time later, the friend looks at Keshaun and says, "Hey, it's kind of getting late. We should probably head home. It's getting late." Keshaun said, "I don't want to go home. I want to stay here." And that's when the friend left, and that was the last known sighting that we have of him.
So very soon, there is a reward announced. It originally starts at $1,500, and then amazing members of this community kick in on it. The U.S. Marshals kick in on it. That reward is currently up to, I believe, $27,500, and I think almost 20,000 of that donated by the community. Really amazing community supporting this mother here. The case is being investigated as a possible abduction. Snowden said that it's very irregular for her son not to return home or to lose communication. She also said that their calls to his phone were going straight to voicemail. She said that she was not aware that her son was going to be attending that party, which even keep in mind for the story that we're hearing, he goes to the party, they ask him to leave, he winds up somewhere else. So the party is not necessarily the kind of end all for his story. It seems like they've been able to trace his movements past that. And again, just kids being kids, he went somewhere else that seemingly his mother did not know about. They're tight with the information about who was at the party, so that's a red flag, she said. It shouldn't be a problem. If a kid's missing, it shouldn't be a problem with anyone to disclose any information of who was at the party. Like I said, people are scared of what may happen. They don't like to get involved, but I know there's still some good people out there that's willing to come forward with that information. So I don't know if at this time she was aware of that kind of extra hoop that the investigator has been talking about on that more recent podcast. The name of the podcast is Dark Side of the Land, and they have had 3 episodes about Keshaun's case so far. Pretty much episode number 1 is, if you're going to listen to any of them, I'd say go for episode number 1, because that's where you're going to hear most from the investigators that are working the case directly. Episode 2, if I remember correctly, is largely just a press conference, and I'm going to share most of the details from that press conference with you guys here. And then episode 3 touches a little bit on a development that has happened, I think within the past month, which we'll also be covering for you here. But if you want to hear it directly from the investigators' own lips, episode 1, I will have a link to it in the description box down below. But let's go ahead and continue here. And unfortunately, we very quickly get a few months down the road, and there's not a lot more progress, at least that's being publicly discussed. Over at news5cleveland.com, nearly 3 months have passed since Sharice Snowden last saw her only son, Keshaun Williams. He is the 35th Amber Alert to be issued in Northeast Ohio since 2014. 34 children have been found. Williams is still missing. And if nothing else, just take that as an example of what a powerful tool the Amber Alert is. I mean, notifying hundreds of thousands of people or tens of thousands of people, depending on how wide they set those notifications to go. Obviously, it really works. Almost all of these kids have been found. But of course, we're looking for Keshaun. He's very good at boxing, his mother said. He's very close to Coach Ray. Coach Ray is like a role model for him. Coach Ray Hamrick met Williams about 6 months before Williams's disappearance. His mom brought him to the gym saying that he wanted to learn how to box. And I was like, well, come on. His character showed more than just in the ring. He's a hell of a kid. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not somewhere looking for him, Hamrick said. The tips I get, I follow them. I've had people call to the gym in the middle of practice. I'll shut the gym down. Hamrick is not alone. Alicia Smith paired up with Hamrick and started parking her food truck, Box and Diva's Knockout Food Truck, in Cleveland neighborhoods to help search for Williams daily. As she explained, she and Williams boxed at the same gym. He's part of my boxing family, she said. So we do have a lot of really amazing community support that's happening around this outside of the significant money that's been put towards the reward. As we get to October of 2023, that Amber Alert still hanging out there, still active. Volunteers distributed flyers in hopes of driving in some more leads for Cleveland Police Detective Ryan Corrigan, and he is the detective on the podcast. You see that it looks run down and a lot of vacant houses, but in between all of those houses, there's good citizens and good people that still care and want this boy to come home safe, he said when discussing the neighborhood. Corrigan said that the teen called his aunt late that night, and that's the last outgoing call or text made from his phone. He called her crying, Corrigan said. She said, "Hey, it's okay, just come home." He said he didn't want to come home yet. So it's just strange because some of these details are making it sound like potentially a runaway situation, but then we hear about possibly something happened to him after this. And even that, I wouldn't say runaway situation, just this one's pretty clear. He's not ready to come home for some reason. Maybe it's as simple as he's intoxicated and he doesn't want to get in trouble. Corrigan said some of Williams' friends reported seeing him a few days later, beaten up in the back of a vehicle at a gas station a few blocks away. That prompted officers to issue an Amber Alert. So confirmation that really the information about the Jeep is what clicked in the Amber Alert there. Over at fox8.com. The Fox 8i team learned that there was a large Cleveland police presence in a field off of I-77 near Fleet Avenue as officers searched for 15-year-old Keshaun Williams, who's been missing for nearly 6 months. There were over a dozen officers searching the field throughout the morning. Officers started leaving the wooded area around 11:30. We can see they've got about a minute and a half of video, but it's largely just people walking around processing the field. If we take a look at where this is happening, the pin mark that you can see, that is his home neighborhood. And basically they're looking over on the other side of the 77 here. There's a reservation, a little bit of parkland that you see in this area. So this seems to be where they were looking. Now, why are they looking, 6 months after the fact? They have some details here at WKYC.com. Cleveland police tell 3 News that 30 officers and federal agents, alongside cadaver dogs, searched an area of creek bed from I-77 to East 55th Street, but found nothing. Officials wanted to search this area since the summer, but they had to wait until there was more visibility after the leaves fell off the trees, which I'm curious about. And I don't know enough about these types of search efforts, but I would be concerned if the leaves have fallen off the trees that they could actually cover up something that's on the ground. Of course, if they do have cadaver dogs out there, that would be helpful in terms of finding if there is a body out there. But I also understand that if the leaves are in the trees, then seeing through trees is going to be much more difficult. I kind of see both sides of it, but I'm curious about, how that decision is selected. Maybe it's something I'll have to ask my friend Jason Watts about next time we're together. Cleveland police say that this remains an active search. So strong message from police over and over and over. They're staying on top of this. We can see there's some movement that is happening on this as that first year comes through. But then we get to 1 year later. We still don't know where Keshaun is. Police Chief John Majoy said that they've issued 36 Amber Alerts, 35 of which have been successful. So they obviously had another one since Keshaun's disappearance. The longest one we had prior to this went on for maybe 4 or 5 days. For one to go on for a year, that's definitely extraordinary. Chief Majoy says that the Amber Alert has remained active because doing so continues to highlight that Keshaun may be in danger. And certainly we're concerned about that with the information that they've heard. Even despite the fact that that vehicle, and that's what I'm kind of curious about, is that information connected to that specific vehicle? Or is it that that information was said by someone, they were maybe unsure of the details of the vehicle, and somehow that vehicle was identified? Like, they went to cameras for the gas station and they're like, oh, here's a vehicle that matches the description. That might be the one we're looking for. It's just strange to me that we have this component of the vehicle come into play, is seemingly removed, but we're still acting on the presumption that information about him being spotted in a vehicle is accurate. So it just makes me wonder about how that first vehicle was selected. Authorities revealed that a recent tip reported in the last few weeks. Okay, so this article is from October of 2024. So we're getting another tip now. And if you feel like your head was on a swivel before, wait until you hear this. A tip was reported in the last few weeks, and it also involves a vehicle connected to Keshaun's disappearance. We have reason to believe that he was last seen walking away from the party and entering a dark-colored SUV. So we're getting almost the same information again, with a group of juvenile males, according to Deputy U.S. Marshal Piccoli. Early on, there was information that was released that a black Jeep was involved and was a suspect vehicle. That had been vetted and is not accurate. However, there is new information regarding this dark-colored SUV is accurate, and we believe it to be true. So somehow we wind up back in square one, but they're saying it's not square one. It's a different vehicle that we're looking for now. Piccoli said the tips believed to be accurate, and between 2 and 4 kids were entering the SUV. Have you guys been able to identify any of the other juveniles who were believed to be in that car as well? The reporter at News 5 Cleveland asked Piccoli. So it's still an ongoing investigation. Unfortunately, I can't disclose that, he responded. The reporter then asked if investigative tools, including cameras in the neighborhood and city, are being reviewed to pinpoint a more exact description of the vehicle. Piccoli says, yes, absolutely. Reporter asked, but nothing's turned up yet, and Piccoli says no. Piccoli said that it's believed that Williams is still in the Cleveland area, and there's actually several comments throughout the first year of his disappearance that are just reaffirming that time and time again. Investigators think he is still in this area. He has never left this area. And then we get to October 30th, just a few weeks ago, and we have authorities search Cuyahoga River for cars linked to missing youth, Keshaun Williams. And surprise, surprise, we're looking at, you can see 2 dark-colored SUVs that have been pulled out of the water. But even more than that, these cars are pretty much a match for the original description that we heard. These are both Jeep SUVs. And just right off the bat, looking at this picture here, how can you not think these are involved in a crime of some kind? These are both later model. I can't tell exactly how old they are, but I would guesstimate they're certainly within the past 15 years, if not 10 or even newer. These aren't 40-year-old vehicles that are being found from the water. It's also curious to me that they seem to be very close in terms of years to each other. Just looking at kind of the design, the size of the windows. I mean, look at even the rims. Like, they almost look like a match for each other. So, having 2 vehicles, these vehicles before they went in the water, obviously worth some money to someone. You could sell them or part them out, something along those lines. So the question for me, as soon as I saw this development, are these vehicles involved in a crime? Of course. How else are they in the water? And we'll get some confirmation of that, but let's get to the details here. Police recovered 2 black Jeeps that they believe are linked to the youth, officials said, and this is according to Cleveland.com. Officials pulled black SUVs from the river near West 3rd Street and Jefferson Avenue. So that address is about just under 4 miles away from where he was supposedly at the party down on Gertrude Avenue. So another important consideration, these things are pretty close logistically. Until we process the vehicles that we recovered, we will not have much information to confirm, said Sergeant Wilfredo Diaz, a spokesman for the department. The people who live at the home where the youth was last seen have cooperated with the investigation, authorities said. So this is a little bit of a change from what his mother was saying. And maybe it's that Keshaun's mother, when she was asking him, they were keeping it tight-lipped. Maybe they've since been able to talk to the authorities about what has happened there. But authorities putting out the word that, hey, look, where the party was, they're cooperating with him. And maybe that's even how they get that information about, oh no, he left this place and then got into a car with several other young people. Officials have not been able to obtain any surveillance or track Keshaun's cell phone to gain additional information. And it's also noting that the reward increased around this time. So there's something really bizarre that happens around all this too. Like, we haven't seen enough like back and forth when it comes to this case. It seemed fairly clear that when they were going after those vehicles, there was comments from people, including the chief of police. We can see it right here. This is over at their local WKYC News 3. Newburgh Heights Chief of Police John Majoy confirmed to 3 News that the recovery operation is connected to Keshaun Williams. It's so weird that that's at the top of this article, because by the bottom of this article, it's like we're supposed to be believing something else. But let's go through this. The Cleveland Division of Police called the recovery a training exercise that was planned weeks in advance and would not confirm that the recovered vehicles were related to Keshaun's case. Quote, "We've become aware of the unauthorized statements linking the vehicle recoveries and training exercise to the missing person case of Keshaun Williams," CDP Public Information Officer Sergeant Wilfredo Diaz wrote in a long statement. That's the same guy that we just quoted from this other article where he said, we got testing to do. There's not a lot of information. So why is now admittedly, that's not him saying, oh, this is definitely related to Keshaun's case, but training exercise, and he knew that in advance. When you were talking to the last news source, wouldn't you have been clear about that? Oh, this is not what it looks like. This is a training exercise. There seems to have been some shift in the narrative around Keshaun's case with this particular development. And maybe it's that they figured out very quickly that it wasn't what they were looking for some reason. Some of the pictures I've looked at of when they pulled those cars out of the water, they pried the doors open. They were processing all the mud that was inside of the vehicles. I'm fairly certain that they were looking for some form of remains, and they didn't find anything, is at least that we know about publicly. So I think that might have been a factor in how this narrative is now kind of being reformed and changing again. But let's continue with his statement, because they've also been very critical of people in the social media space in terms of, don't be just spreading wild rumors about this case. So I'm trying to stick to sources and information that we can rely on pretty strongly. So he says, "At this time, we cannot confirm whether these vehicles are related to this specific case, which is why our investigation is ongoing. We were informed of the vehicles by another agency, and their recovery was part of the training exercise. Our officers were present out of an abundance of caution." It's important to note that while these vehicles could potentially be connected to Keshaun's case, they could also relate to another crime or may not be linked to any violent crime at all. Speculating about a connection at this stage would be premature. This compassionate approach is intentional. We want to avoid giving false hope that could further traumatize the families and friends of missing persons or crime victims. That statement might be the reasoning for this whole shift. It could be that there was some excitement and even anxiety being felt by Keshaun's family, Keshaun's friends, and that was starting to funnel back to law enforcement. Hey, do you guys have answers yet? Do you have answers yet? And they knew, oh, we gotta change things up here, because either the testing's going to take so long, we can't have them calling us every day. I mean, you'd hate to think people make decisions like that, but unfortunately, I've spoken to enough families to know at least they feel like those types of decisions have been made. Or B, they've already identified, no, these are not the vehicles we're looking for. These really have nothing to do with Keshaun. We urge our partners, both law enforcement agencies and the media, to disseminate accurate information following this compassionate approach as well. I wish he would have led with that comment, because that's a pretty powerful statement. That makes a lot of sense and kind of reframes things very quickly. So just looking into this a bit more, I kind of wanted to understand, well, what was this other organization? Like, who found these cars and all this? Apparently, it was one of these YouTube dive teams, Chaos Divers. The vehicles were originally discovered by out-of-state divers who located the 2 SUVs on October 20th. An Illinois dive team was searching the Cuyahoga River for a missing father when they came across several vehicles. And I'm seeing comments as to that fact too, that there's actually many more vehicles that are in this stretch of water. Maybe none that seem to match. And to the point of, oh, well, if this is really a training exercise, why are we only pulling up the 2 dark colored SUVs? Seems like there's other vehicles that are there as well. If we're going to do all this training, let's go ahead and do the training. Let's pull up as many of these as we can. For some reason, that's not exactly what happened. Seems like they only pulled up those 2. So they do eventually come out with some information, new information about those 2 Jeeps, and they do confirm they are certainly part of some type of crime. Cleveland police told 19 Investigates both of the Jeeps were stolen, and at least one of them was used in a shooting. Now, I've seen even more of a description that says that shooting was, I think it was phrased, the shooting was towards a habitat. Sounds to me like a drive-by shooting that happened into someone's house. There's no information at this time to indicate the Jeeps are connected to missing teenager Keshaun Williams. So they're really just kind of beating that drum when it comes to these particular Jeeps. There's no information connecting them. So another thing that happens around this case is there are a couple articles that come out, and it kind of spins the public dialogue about Keshaun's case. And it's kind of an unfortunate thing. In one way, I appreciate what's trying to be done with this form of conversation, but in another, I don't want to take attention away from what we're supposed to be focusing on, which is Keshaun's case. There's this run of articles about what about the other 30 kids that went missing that month. And just to highlight that, I'm not going to lean into this too much, but there is so much, I'm seeing a lot of online discussion about this aspect. And I've seen this trend time and time before. I've even chased this trend down several years ago when it was talking about the DC teens that were all missing. I went and tracked every single one of those occurrences, and they hit the same numbers as most of these cases do. 90% of them solve themselves within a matter of a few weeks. There are some that go longer, but that big number of, hey, 30 or 40 kids went missing from Cleveland in particular in that month, and that's abnormal. Actually, when you look into the numbers, it's not abnormal. And many of those cases do solve themselves. So here we have the Sun reporting series of disappearances. Keshaun is among an unprecedented number of children who have disappeared in the Cleveland area. It's not true. If you actually dig into the stats for yourself, that honestly, if it's unprecedented, it's because this month is probably lower than usual for their typical month based on some of the research that I did on this. But they have the chief of police also and as part of this article, which is strange because this guy knows his stuff about missing persons cases. And I'm pretty sure he interviewed them under good intentions. And I think they kind of spun it into being something else. So I'm not even going to lean on it too much. But just to kind of close that hoop, if you're looking for the information to counter that, Newsweek also kind of picked up on the fact that publications were doing this. And they note here, the president of a Cleveland center that helps find missing children has said that headlines claiming that 1,000 minors are missing in Ohio are misleading and only spreading fear. The coverage followed data from Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost's website, which noted that 1,072 children had been reported missing in 2023 in the Cleveland, Akron area. The statistics include all open cases in Ohio dating back to 1928. So we've got big misunderstandings in terms of that data. And quite honestly, I don't want to run you guys. I feel like we're already getting way too far off Keshaun. Even if you just do the simple math of the numbers that they've included here in this Sun article, the math doesn't even hold up to itself, to the self-reporting that's happening in here. So just know, for some reason, some of these publications will take a story like Keshaun's, turn that into a different headline of, oh, by the way, he's one of 30 kids that went missing. This is unprecedented. Not really. And here we have the chief, again, quoted, some media outlets are manipulating the statistics to grab public attention. This has in turn spawned conspiracy theories about missing children. He said that over 90% of children returned to their families in a short space of time. And honestly, 90% is probably even low. It's usually a bit higher than that. But what we do have is we have Keshaun's case, and we have the investigators working it, and Cleveland Police, the missing persons unit, they're being clear. They're overwhelmed. And this is an article just from September of 2024. They chase leads, field calls from the public and psychics, and work tirelessly to reunite families. 6 detectives make up Cleveland's missing persons team. With a staggering number of new cases each day, these detectives are stretched thin. Basically, they have 6 detectives, and based on what they say in this article, you can get at least 5 and many days more than that missing person cases per day. So that means for ones that don't close out immediately, you have those bleed into the next day. Oh, there's another new 5. There's another new 5. So having 6 detectives working that constant flow of cases that are coming in. And for some of these cases, I know we kind of hear that, oh, it's 48 hours. The kid's usually found within 48 hours. Not really, especially with the teen disappearances. Those can sometimes go on for a few weeks. So those cases are hanging in there, having to be worked. But you've constantly got 5 or more new cases coming in each day for this 6-man team. So Detective Ryan Corrigan, who's newer to the unit, says that he finds the work rewarding and daunting. It can be hard sometimes. Whatever my caseload is, I'm doing everything I can to bring them home. And of course, he's the one that's working on Keshaun's case. So we're certainly thanking him and wishing him the best of luck in continuing to process this case and hopefully bring Keshaun back to his mother. I do want to share just a little word from Chief Majoy here about your part, how you can help Keshaun's case.
You know, social media is one of our biggest assets here. Take this story and share it, because maybe they didn't see the press conference, maybe they didn't get a chance to watch the news. Share this story with your contacts, and please do that, because nobody ever wants to be in the shoes that this mother is in. And so put yourself in her shoes for just a quick minute. What would you want people to do? And you would want their help. They could be strangers, and it's fine, because we're all good people. We just need your help.
So please take a moment, think, do you have any friends, any acquaintances, anybody that you can reach out to in the Cleveland area? Share this video with them. Let's keep the exposure raised, and let's also give Keshaun's family another dose of someone out here cares, and we're waiting for Keshaun to come home and be part of your family again as well. As a matter of fact, someone has a message direct for Keshaun, and that's his mother.
Keshaun, since you've been gone, I have been worried about you. I miss the days that we eat breakfast together, we watch movies. I just miss seeing you in the morning when you wake up. I just miss waiting for you to walk through that door.
Keshaun Williams, age 16, missing since June 17th, 2023, from Cleveland, Ohio. And we certainly hope that that situation changes very soon and that Keshaun can come home and be with his family. I want to give a very big thank you to several supporters. You might notice that we run severely limited ads here on the main channel. We do that so you can stay focused on the case, but we can't do that without support. A big thank you to PayPal supporters Brandy Fry, Angela Welch Sola, Amanda Beard, and a special thanks to Lori Ann. If you'd like to become one of those supporters, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee like Candy Bishop recently did. We really appreciate your support as we help these families in these very tough situations. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Have a nice weekend. And please join us again next week here on the Lord and Arts channel.